A little while ago, I was sent this clip posted by Answers in Genesis Canada titled An Easy Way to Challenge an Atheist, in which their executive director, Calvin Smith, answers the age-old question, what if Ken Ham had a baby with Jordan Peterson?
This is the question to ask the atheist that says this. What is it that you lack belief in? Make them explain it. Do you lack a belief in Allah, the Gitche Manitou, the one true God of the Bible? What is God that you lack belief in like? Prompt them. Is it the God you believe in supposed to have the power to create the universe? Yes or no? Does the God you lack belief in supposedly set the moral absolutes? Yes or no?
I risk getting copyright claimed if I use more than 30 consecutive seconds of somebody else's video in my video, so I'm going to put a little break here. From now on, if I have something interesting to say to interrupt the video with, I'll do that, but otherwise, I'm just going to cut to this picture of Jeffrey the pangolin that's more honest than Calvin Smith. I think that'll work just fine for everybody.
You see, saying you have a lack of belief may sound like it makes sense to someone until you realize that once you're introduced to an idea, you can't be neutral towards it. You begin making judgments about the concepts that you're being exposed to. You can consider it's plausible, accepted, think it's nuts, crazy, rejected, or whatever. Maybe you need more information to come to a definite conclusion. But you can't just say any longer that you lack a belief in it, because it isn't it. It's defined to some extent a concept, so you can't lack a belief in it anymore the way you're trying to frame it.
So Calvin is pretending that attempting to define a God is a legitimate challenge against not believing in one. Because once you prescribe attributes to the God that you don't believe in, you must then judge the concept of those attributes. And lack of belief isn't a valid stance to take against concepts. It's literally just gaslighting you into theism. It's wild. Like, this dude is trying so hard to come up with a gotcha, but at the end, it just sounds like that one time that Tim Allen tried to sound like he was smarter than, well, Tim Allen.
My older daughter's atheist, and I said, well, philosophically, it's an irony there too, because atheists don't believe in God. Well, there has to be a God for you not to believe in. And my daughter goes, she's still in therapy over that.
Way to represent your daughter, dude. Glad to hear that you believe in Bigfoot too, because there must be a Bigfoot for you to not believe in. Anyway, seeing that clip from Calvin got me to do the exact opposite thing that Answers in Genesis wants you to do when you watch their videos, which is to start thinking. Specifically, I started thinking about shorts. They're not just the symbol of the summer anymore, they're also YouTube's best hope at leeching business away from TikTok, despite running on a vastly inferior algorithm. The platform wars continue to rage on all around us. No creator is safe. Always struggling to keep up with vastly different trends and interfaces, then cross-promote to other audiences where it just doesn't work. Always dealing with the internal turmoil of trying to balance sustainability and scalability, monetization and authenticity. Always deliberating over which multi-billion-dollar corporation to sell our time and talents to, as they all try to fill the void that Vine left behind almost a decade ago. What a time to be alive. So today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the most popular shorts from both Answers in Genesis and Answers in Genesis Canada. I'm literally just sorting them by most views and then watching a random assortment of the top videos alternating between each channel. Spoiler alert, they're all bad, but some are funnier than others. Before we begin, just one quick note that guarantees that I am offering you the kind of honesty and integrity that Answers in Genesis never would. It's really important to remember as we watch these shorts that many of them appear to be clips from longer videos, and it's entirely possible that there is some context or some nuance within those longer videos that is being lost by cutting them down to a short. So normally, I would hesitate to judge these shorts as if they were complete arguments. But if there's one group that is never going to get a single benefit of the doubt from me, it's the cult that spends millions of dollars a year teaching children that unicorns are real and donkeys can talk. If they thought that these shorts were good enough to publish like this, then I think they're good enough to react to like this. So let's not waste any more time getting started. Welcome back to Reacteria.
St. George is said to have killed a dragon around 275 AD, and the description of the dragon that he killed consists of a dinosaur known as Baryonyx. And in that very same region, we do find bones of Baryonyx. A city in France, renamed in honor of the dragon that was killed there, described as bigger than an ox with long, sharp-pointed horns on its head. Maybe a triceratops of some sort.
So right out the gate, the most viewed short from Answers in Genesis, the #1 on their channel, says that dragons are real because people wrote about dragons before.
Dragon tales, it's almost time for dragon tales.
Now, this is nothing new for Answers in Genesis. I've spoken several times before about how they believe that dragons were real, how they could fly, how they could breathe fire, and how the stories of knights in shining armor slaying dragons in the days of old are all actually true. But what I find most interesting about this short in particular is that they're starting with the story of St. George, who is said to have slain a dragon. St. George died in the year 303. But the story about the dragon wasn't added to his biography until around the 1100s, and it didn't really get popular until around the year 1260 with the publishing of a book called The Golden Legend, which detailed out the lives and miracles of all sorts of saints, as well as interesting new details to several popular Bible stories. I don't study either literature or history, but it's my understanding that just as Dante's Inferno massively influenced people's idea of hell far beyond what the Bible actually says, the Golden Legend massively shaped people's perception of the histories of these saints well beyond what was actually historically accurate. But beyond all of that, what's most important here is that when you look at all of the different renditions and retellings and statues and paintings detailing out descriptions of this famous story, a lot of them, certainly all that I've ever seen, depict this dragon as having wings. Like in this Scholastic brand study page from the UK, which specifically says that the dragon was killed when St. George struck it under the wings where it had no scales. Now, getting back to the clip here where Answers in Genesis says that this dragon was very clearly a dinosaur called Baryonyx, please show me a Baryonyx fossil with wings. Or can we maybe agree that that part was probably an embellishment? And if that part was an embellishment, what about some of the other parts, like maybe its ability to breathe fire or its size? What if, hear me out here, considering the fact that the story of St. George and the dragon takes place in northern Africa, not southern England where Baryonyx lived, the beast was actually just a large crocodile? And that 2,000 years of exaggerations and mistranslations account for the vast disparities between all the different versions of this story that we see today. But don't expect to get any of that consideration from Answers in Genesis. The only reason why they are even talking about St. George right now is because they believe that the Bible is completely inerrant, not a single word out of place. So they can't handle things like the historical context of the Bible, or the fact that the Hebrew and Greek words which are translated to dragon in the Bible don't mean anything even close to the way we use the word dragon today. That would mean that in its current translated, retranslated, mistranslated state, the Bible has a flaw, and they're not allowed to say that. So instead, they look for any mention of dragons, any mention of a big lizard, any mention of anything that sort of sounds like it might be a dinosaur from anywhere in the world, any context, any source, anywhere in history, and hold that up as undeniable proof of their wackadoodle claims. They need so desperately to fit the square peg of their faith into the round hole of reality, and the one way that they invariably accomplish that task is by just lying. Case in point,
The description of the dragon that he killed consists of a dinosaur known as Baryonyx.
what description of the dragon describes it as Baryonyx? How does the description of the dragon describe it as Baryonyx? That it was big? That it was scaly? What specific details from this specific story specifically identify this specific dragon as Baryonyx and differentiate it from any other possible dinosaur anywhere else in the world? How does this story describe only Baryonyx and not a crocodile, not some other monster that isn't a dragon, or any other possible thing that it could possibly be except for an English dinosaur that somehow made its way to Libya? Answers in Genesis won't provide any of those details because those details don't exist. Because what actually just happened in reality is that they found a Christian story from England that mentions a dragon, Googled big dinosaurs from England, found the first one that popped up, and said that that must be what this story from 1,000 years ago about a man who lived 1,000 years before the story was written must have been talking about. They just lied.
A city in France, renamed in honor of the dragon that was killed there, described as bigger than an ox with long, sharp-pointed horns on its head. maybe a triceratops of some sort. Marco Polo, the man not the game, reported in 1271 AD that the emperor in China used dragons to pull his chariots in his parades. And some will say, well, okay, well that makes sense, but then if there were dinosaurs on the ark during the flood and they got off the ark and they lived with men after the flood, then shouldn't we find some written historical documentation of that? Surely people would write about that, and indeed they would, and they did. But remember, the word dinosaur is a brand new word, not invented until 1841, but before then they were called something else, and we find this name in pretty much every single culture all around the world. What were they called? Dragons.
And then there are these other stories. One is an animal that's bigger than an ox with pointed horns on its head, which must be a triceratops because no other animals like that exist. Then they say that the emperor of China used dragons to pull his chariots, which can't possibly be a mistranslation or misinterpretation of things like crocodilians or people in parade costumes. It must actually mean real dragons because one guy said so. And finally, that all these other cultures around the world also have dragon stories. Therefore, dragons must be real because there are absolutely no examples of ancient people finding skulls and bones from real animals and thinking that they were actually from mythical creatures, like how the Greeks famously thought that dwarf elephant skulls were cyclopses. Nothing like that has ever occurred. I swear if these people were around 1,000 years from now, they'd be calling the Flintstones a documentary. Literally, this entire video was just a drunk text message being presented as a scientific discussion. It's just awful. And the top comment is the Komodo dragon still exists and it has over 2,000 likes. Yeah, that's a great example of the kind of thinking that Answers in Genesis encourages. All right, I've got to be a lot faster about this if we're going to get through too many of these without me going insane. So let's see what Canada's up to.
If you ask the average person to guess what wiped out the dinosaurs, most will say the giant asteroid theory, as even though there are several dinosaur extinction models out there, it's still the most commonly depicted in popular culture. But the fossil record reveals many creatures like ducks, squirrels, platypus, and beaver kinds, for example, were living alongside dinosaurs, which undermines this popular evolutionary story.
So here we have Calvin deliberately misrepresenting the idea that the asteroid killed the dinosaurs as the assertion that the asteroid killed all of the dinosaurs and only the dinosaurs, something that no serious biologist would ever claim. The KT mass extinction, which was triggered by that asteroid strike, wiped out 75 to 80% of all life on Earth, not just the dinosaurs. And plenty of dinosaurs survived that mass extinction as well. They're just birds, not dragons.
Why? Because if all of these creatures were living together, why would an asteroid impact event only wipe out the dinosaurs and not the other creatures that coexisted with them? Not to mention their supposed evolutionary cousins like lizards and crocodiles. Not one single event has been proposed by evolutionists can completely explain dinosaur extinction, which is why there are several more extinction theories out there the average person is usually unaware of.
I love this assertion that there are some parts of the KT extinction that science just hasn't figured out yet, and there are some competing hypotheses about certain parts. So you really ought to just throw all of that out and just accept the Bible without question. Like, he's literally just saying scientists don't know everything in order to try to sell you on the idea of pretending to know everything and deliberately learning nothing. But wait, whether or not that asteroid existed is a belief, and I can prescribe the attribute to the asteroid that it had the power to kill the dinosaurs. That makes it a concept, and you can't not believe in concepts, and that means that Calvin Smith does believe that the asteroid killed the dinosaurs. Boy, thinking is fun.
But how do you get a fossil fish in the first place? Look at the beautiful state of preservation of that fish. Well, here's a fish about to have his breakfast, doesn't get time to swallow it before he's buried and fossilized. You can't preserve a fossil like that where he's just about to take a chomp and he's frozen in an instant. In fact, here's another example from a museum in Germany. That's a marine reptile, 6 feet long, giving birth to a baby. 1 minute, mother is about to give birth to a baby. Split second later, she's buried in tons and tons of mud. Fossilization had to be catastrophic, virtually instant and rapid. Or these crinoids. Look at the heads of those crinoids or coelides. They're delicate. They have been preserved. Or the wings of this wasp. How do you fossilize a wasp like that if it's not rapidly and catastrophically buried?
This just in, folks. Breaking news, hot off the presses from Answers in Genesis. Nothing has ever choked to death. Nothing has ever died while giving childbirth. Strange things never happen. Stuff like small-scale floods, mudslides, rapid sediment deposits, volcanic eruptions, natural dams bursting, and the very existence of river deltas has never been documented. That means that there's no way for something to be buried quickly except in the event of a global catastrophe, and it also means that Lagerstätten, which are uniquely excellent fossil beds where you find things like insect fossils and highly detailed articulated skeletons and maybe even soft tissues through highly unusual and highly specific taphonomic pathways, are quite common and not rare at all. Also, the Komodo dragon still exists, so you need to keep that in mind.
If I lined up a spoon, a spork, and a fork, would their shapes be evidence of one having evolved into another? Or would it be more likely evidence of them having been designed by the same creator?
If you could build a machine to harness the power of that man's smugness in that moment, you could power a small city.
You see, a little red wagon, a tricycle, a bicycle, a Honda Civic, and a Lamborghini are all quite different, and yet all have various similar component parts as well. And that's because an intelligent designer would use similarly effective and useful parts in a wide variety of applications. So the whole similarity equals proof of evolution argument is dubious regardless.
You're absolutely right, Calvin. Similarities necessarily imply a common designer. Although that does make me wonder what that means about all those stories of all those other gods who were all born of a virgin and did miracles related to life and healing, and who were killed and then raised from the dead and ascended to a higher plane, all of whom predate Jesus. I wonder if that means that all of these stories also have a common designer, like maybe, for example, some species of great ape that's really widespread and likes to make up stories.
So what do you think this is? It looks like a dinosaur, doesn't it? How about this one? Bird or dinosaur? This one looks like a bird.
The second drawing does not look like a bird because, among other things, it has teeth and a bony tail and no beak.
There's just one problem. Those two drawings are based on the same skeleton, just posed differently. One pose makes it look more like a dinosaur. The other pose makes it more like a bird. See, we have to be careful with drawings because they can be used to make an animal look like a dinosaur, or look like a bird, or even look like a missing link.
One cool thing about bones is that they actually fit together in really specific ways, which means there are actually ways to test whether or not your bird reconstruction is reasonable. And if you really cared about what you were saying and weren't just deliberately lying in order to attract new donors to your cult, you could have asked a paleontologist or an anatomist to explain that to you. Also, just throwing this out there, birds evolved from dinosaurs, so of course there are a lot of morphological similarities in their skeletons, and you showing this reconstruction of a theropod becoming a bird is actually doing a lot more work to demonstrate evolution than it is to debunk it. So, thanks, I guess?
Okay, so let's get this straight. What you're saying is that if your atheistic worldview is true, you can't know anything for certain. But if my worldview is true as a Christian, I can know things for certain? Well, absolutely, but I don't believe in your God, he said. So I looked at him and said, you know that absolutely? I thought you just told me if your worldview was true that you couldn't know anything for sure. So how do you know that with certainty?
If you don't know anything for certain, then you can't know for certain that you don't know anything for certain. Ipso facto, Jesus.
He looked at me and opened his mouth and reconsidered, paused again, turned, and then blustered out something about how science strongly supported evolution, even if he couldn't know it for certain. After I asked him how he knew that for certain, he muttered something about utter skepticism and walked away, leaving the circle of onlookers baffled by the brief exchange. I learned afterwards that this man apparently prided himself on challenging Christians whenever possible, so they were quite surprised when he exited the arena so quickly.
Yeah, I'll take things that never happened for 1,000, Alex. While I'm sure this conversation was super cool in Calvin's head where it actually took place, the problem of not knowing everything in the universe, and therefore never really knowing anything for certain, is not solved by simply asserting that you know a guy who does know everything in the universe. If you don't know everything in the universe, and therefore can't be certain about anything besides what the guy tells you, then that means that you can't know for sure what the guy is telling you, or whether or not the guy exists in the first place, because all of that information has to be filtered through your mind, which is unreliable because it doesn't know everything in the universe. No matter how you slice it, you are still basing your worldview on your personal interpretation and faith. And that leads you to the all-important question, is faith or evidence a better pathway to the truth? If you think that faith is a reliable pathway to the truth, please name me one single thing that you cannot believe in based on faith. The thing that you can't believe in based on evidence is anything that you don't have evidence for. Lots and lots of things exist that I don't have evidence for, so there are lots and lots of things that I don't believe in. And the things that I do believe in are things that I have evidence for. Meanwhile, I can believe in absolutely anything based on faith. No limits, no excuses, no reason, no logic. Faith alone builds the belief. Which one of those would you rather build your world around? Because let me tell you, when I get on an airplane or go to the emergency room, I want to see evidence at work, not faith. And so do you. As far as this clip is concerned, if Calvin had a spine and a brain to match, he would learn to think logically, find some real evidence, and make a serious argument for his claims that could stand on its own 2 feet. But he doesn't. So instead, he runs an organization which is famous for misrepresenting real scientists and making up lies to try to make themselves look good, as he is doing here. It's like trying to become a championship weightlifter by changing out all of your weights for styrofoam. And then when all the real weightlifters call you incredibly stupid, you just tell everybody that they called you incredible. The unbelievable lengths that this dude will go to satisfy his delusions of adequacy just never cease to amaze me.
How Asian artists pictured Jesus' birth from 1240 to today. And what we learned in this article is that depicting Jesus as an Asian is totally fine because it's not aiming at historical realism, but a theological meaning, as this article claims. We can run into some problems if we start heading down that road, can't we?
When they start the article by saying Jesus was born in Asia, he was Asian. Technically, if you're born in Asia, yes, but that's not what people think of when you say a statement like that. Just like saying we're all Americans because we're all from the continent of North America or South America. No, when you say American, you have a very specific thing in mind that isn't true for either
United
of us.
States.
He came through a specific line because God promised he would come from the line of Abraham. He cannot be the savior of the world if he doesn't fulfill the Old Testament.
If he's not the savior from the line of David, then we don't really have any true hope in the gospel.
So setting aside how uncomfortable all of that was, Jesus can't look East Asian because he's actually from the Levant. And that's why in the graphic that they showed on screen to prove their point, he's just white as all hell. They're taking themselves so seriously. They're making this strong case about how all these other cultures depicting their religious figures as looking like themselves, something which happens all the time, all around the world, is blasphemous and irresponsible because Jesus was clearly Middle Eastern. His ancestry is undeniable. And then they end on this image of Mr. Steal Your Land. My man looks like he just got done redecorating his beach-themed bathroom. He looks like he's about to explain someone else's culture to them. He looks like John Denver's preachy cousin. He looks like he's about to bring democracy to your country by liberating you of all your natural resources. He looks like he's about to get into a great university with a trash GPA because his grandpa knows a guy. He looks like he drinks complicated coffee out of a live, laugh, love mug. He looks like he thinks paprika is a country somewhere near Iran. You're talking about Jesus's ancestry and you show a man who doesn't look like he comes from Nazareth. He looks like he's about to go gentrify it. All I'm saying is if your graphical depictions of Jesus of Christland look like me in all the most unfortunate ways, you might want to reevaluate some things and maybe start paying some reparations.
How could a flood destroy every living thing? Well, the Bible makes it clear that Noah's flood was much more destructive than any 40-day rainstorm ever would be. Even though just a 3-day heavy rainfall today can cause major catastrophic effects on the local terrain and wildlife where it occurs. But the flood event went well beyond torrential rainfall.
I already did the whole I'll take things that didn't happen Alex joke. I don't know what you want from me here.
When the scripture says that the fountains of the great deep broke open, in other words, It's easy to understand earthquakes, volcanoes, and geysers of molten lava and scalding water were squeezed out of the Earth's crust in a violent, explosive upheaval. These fountains were not stopped until 150 days into the flood, so the Earth was literally churning underneath the waters for about 5 months.
So this is just a bunch of claims with no evidence. They have a story that makes no sense, so they're inventing more stories that make no sense to try to make the original story make slightly more sense. It's like if I said that the gnomes living under my house all have cavities because they tried to use candy floss as real floss, and that's why they aren't eating the vegetables in my garden, and that's why my garden doesn't disprove the existence of the vegetable gnomes. It's just assertion after assertion piled on top of one another to try to make it sound like you're the unreasonable one for not believing in the gnomes. We're about halfway through the shorts, and I'm starting to wonder, do you think now is a good time to mention this video is sponsored by Brilliant? Brilliant is a powerful learning app that allows you to learn real math and science every day with fun and interactive lessons right in the palm of your hand. The universe is a beautiful, dynamic, and exciting place, and the best way to enjoy it is by learning about it. That's why Brilliant offers a massive variety of engaging lessons, all of which are handcrafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from Stanford, MIT, and Caltech, and all of which allow you to play with concepts, a much more effective way to learn than by simply watching video lectures. And the best part is, Brilliant is offering my subscribers a chance to try everything that they have to offer, absolutely free for a full 30 days, and get 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant Premium. And all you have to do is go to brilliant.org/forrestvalkai, click the link in the description, or scan the QR code on the screen. I put on a suit for this part. Learning at least a little bit every day is one of the most important things you can do for your mind, your career, and your life in general. So what are you waiting for? Learn some serious science, build your critical thinking and problem-solving skills, and develop a powerful learning habit with Brilliant. Just go to brilliant.org/forrestvalkai, scan the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description to try Brilliant for free for a full 30 days and get 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant Premium. Thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Thank you for watching it. And now I can stop talking like this.
There are a lot of issues that we see in our culture today, and a lot of people look at them and say, how do we deal with all these different problems? But actually, they're all the same problem, and that's the thing we have to remember. They're actually different symptoms of the one problem, and unless we understand that, we're not going to be able to deal with it anyway. And what's the problem? Well, it's like Judges 21:25. When there was no king, no absolute authority, everyone does what is right in his own eyes.
Have I mentioned that I have a Patreon yet? I have a Patreon, and I also do channel memberships here. If you sign up for those, it really benefits the channel. Make sure that I can spend more time focused on writing and researching and recording and editing. I do all this myself. So like, if you wouldn't mind just checking those out, see if there's a tier that fits your budget. And if not, it's okay. Just share this video. That really helps the channel a lot as well. It kind of gets me out there in that algorithm. Those would be great ways you could help support the work that I do if you like the work that I do. And if you don't like the work that I do, then block me. I don't know.
When people ask me what has happened to America, it's very simple. You take generations of kids, you indoctrinate them. There's no God. The Bible's not true. There's no absolute authority except yourself. You're the absolute authority. You determine what's right and wrong. Then ultimately, anything goes. And by the way, in a culture where anything goes and you've got to allow all ideas and beliefs, what doesn't go are the absolutes of Christianity, because they're in conflict.
So this is simultaneously the funniest and most disgusting video that we've seen so far. And it's all 100% because of this graphic right here of all the problems in the world and how they are all being blamed on the secular worldview. So going down the list, we've got racism, something which of course has never existed amongst religious people, least of all Christians, never mind the Nazis, the KKK, the Confederates, or any of the countless times in which Christianity specifically has been used to justify and support racist ideas and practices. Then we've got pedophilia, again, never been a problem for the church. Historically, presently, no concern whatsoever.
Oh my God. What happened here?
Yeah, we're all trying to find the guy who did this and give him a spanking.
It's obviously this guy, right?
Yes.
That part of the graphic specifically, coming from a religious leader, has to be like the most tone-deaf thing I've seen all year. Then we've got abortion and euthanasia, both issues to do with bodily autonomy, which I imagine is a pretty tough concept for people who believe in a supreme being who has the moral right to drown children. And then we've got gender issues and gay marriage, with marriage, of course, being in quotation marks. Literally just the existence of other people and other cultures that don't fit into their parochial box of what a human is allowed to be. Just to sprinkle some very obvious facts into this part of the video, there are countless examples of cultures all around the world and all throughout history that have accepted transgender people and or acknowledged that there are more than two gender options in the first place. There are also countless examples of homosexual people in all different levels of society, in all sorts of different cultures, all around the world, all throughout history. There are countless examples of LGBT people of all stripes being in all sorts of different cultures for as far back as history has been recorded. And most importantly, gender and sexuality are historically more associated with socioeconomic status and power than they ever are with sex. The way that we define and categorize these things is a very modern invention that is reflective of our culture and isn't necessarily applicable to any other culture anywhere ever. But of course, none of that is acceptable to the supreme authority that Ken Ham believes in, which is why the system that Ken Ham is a part of has such a long and horrific history of forced conversion and genocide, precisely because of the attitude depicted in that graphic. But hey, don't take my word for it. I'm just a guy who's read more than one book.
Classical atheists declare there is no God, so they must have an alternative way to explain existence without a supernatural creator. And the only option for them is some form of evolution.
What's the harm in just saying, I don't know? Where did the universe come from? I don't know. Where did life come from? I don't know. Why are we here? I don't know. What's the meaning behind all of this? I don't know. What's so scary about that? I don't understand why talking donkeys and unicorns is preferable to just saying, I don't know a thing.
No matter what you call it, Darwinian evolution, neo-Darwinian evolution, chaos theory, punctuated equilibrium, etc., it's the concept that everything came about through naturalistic processes. And that is the foolishness the psalmist speaks about. A theos, no God.
Thank you very much, Calvin Smith, for once again forgetting that other religions exist. Deists, people who believe in theistic evolution, the billions of Catholics and Muslims around the world who accept evolution and believe in a God? No, none of that. You are either a biblical literalist or an atheist. That's all that exists.
Atheists, many claiming that they're open-minded, rational, or logical, live inside a mental paradigm called naturalism, and they don't think outside that box, so to speak. So, all thinking atheists must believe in evolution. That is their main folly.
All thinking atheists, you say? I only know of one thinking atheist. The thinking atheist. Seth Andrews.
Oh, you wanted me to say something?
Yeah, well, this is where you come in. This is your part where you say hello.
So, I mean, wait, you're segueing from me into what? Like the conversation about the clip we're going to see?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you questions.
All right, yeah, all right, start me. Okay. I'm ready. I'm ready.
So you're the thinking atheist, right?
I am not the thinking atheist. I am Seth Andrews, who is host of the Thinking Atheist, but I'm not the thinking atheist.
But you're the thinking atheist, right?
No, I'm not. It is the thinking atheist, thethinkingatheist.com. There's an icon, and it's a little person with an atheist A symbol in the middle. It is an idea. It is a concept. It is a goal, an aspiration. It is not a person. It certainly is not me. I am not the thinking atheist.
So as the thinking atheist, do you think that the origin of life and evolution and the Big Bang are all the same thing?
No, I do not.
Would you say that it's reasonable to assert that atheism necessitates some sort of alternative belief system, and that alternative belief system must be some form of evolution? Or is it fair to say that a belief in God is completely irrelevant to belief in any other part of science, and that you can just not know things? Is that a stretch to say?
Is it not? He's not totally full of crap on this. But first of all, I do not believe in God. Doesn't necessitate anything else. whether or not you accept evolution, whether or not you're even a logical, rational person, or how you came to a non-belief. I've met flat earth atheists. I've met atheists who believe in ghosts and healers, natural paths and stuff like that. So atheism is simply the lack of a belief in God. And on top of that, how many freaking Christians, and a growing percentage of Christians, and what's the most popular religion on the planet, Catholicism, the Catholic Church, in the 1980s came to officially state that it accepts evolution is a thing. It's ridiculous.
Last but not least, what would you think of a person who chides atheists for calling themselves open-minded and rational and logical while operating under a naturalistic framework, if that person also happened to be the current executive director of an organization which claims to have all secret knowledge in the universe, and that all the foundations of modern science are wrong and can't be trusted unless they agree with them, and also that unicorns and dragons are real?
I mean, this is an organization that says it is a science-based organization, but in its statement, to be accepted on staff, to be one of its scientists, you have to say that if it doesn't appear in the Bible, you reject it outright, which is one of the most anti-science statements I have ever heard. Then we're leaning on a Bible that says, trust not in your own understanding. Who hath known the mind of God? God uses the foolish things to shame the wise. Let him do all the thinking. Well, what kind of an organization takes pride in not thinking? Well, the kind of organization that will then accept wholesale biblical explanations for all kinds of shit. So they're taking literally the story of an Earth younger than the Sumerian civilization, an origin of humankind which involves a couple of cosmically conjured garden nudists, donkeys who could speak Hebrew, supermen who gain power based on the length of their hair, flying fire chariots, levitation, blood magic, right? A man, Jonah, who lived for 3 days in the stomach of a submerged prison fish. You've got ghost sex, magic mud, an end-time story with the Whore of Babylon, essentially a 7-headed dragon-riding space prostitute. That's the kind of stuff you believe when you trust not in your own understanding.
That's really good. That's really good.
Everywhere you look in the living world, it has apparent design written all over it. And it was only when I understood that Darwin had an alternative explanation, a much better explanation for apparent design. It isn't design at all. It's produced by the non-random process called Darwinian natural selection. Once I understood that, there was no longer any need for God.
He clearly would look at creation and say, yes, there is apparent design. But then he said Charles Darwin, right? And he's talking about natural selection again.
And of course, if we're gonna talk about evolution, we have to talk about the only evolutionary biologist in the world, the Pope of atheism himself, Richard freaking Dawkins.
You're going to find this often with Richard Dawkins and many evolutionists, is they equate natural selection and evolution as the same thing. Natural selection is a loss of information. You could definitely say that from the original kind of dog to like a poodle, there's been a loss of information. Evolution requires a gain of information. It requires an organism to literally gather new information and then become a different organism. This has never been observed in nature, ever.
Yeah, so for the rest of this clip, I think that the level at which you can take it seriously can really just be summarized by that nightmare-inducing Animorphs graphic at the end. What the math was that? If you want to hear why this whole natural selection as a loss of information argument is as stupid as that animation is creepy, I've talked about it several times over the course of this series, but just for now, suffice to say, that's not how anything works, and I am so sick of having to answer for Richard Dawkins. Boy, oh boy, I can't wait to see what stupid straw man I'm gonna have to listen to next. Oh goody, it's Atheists Will Not Like This. Why are all of their video titles the same clickbait nonsense?
We observe life forms all around us, from micro to macro. And a good question to ask then is, how did life originate? Although many atheists often try to wiggle off the argumentative hook by declaring that the origin of life has nothing to do with the story of evolution, they're actually being flat out disingenuous in doing so.
I like how he said that we try to wiggle off the hook by claiming that evolution and abiogenesis are different things, when that's literally just a basic demonstration of science literacy.
And because atheists have to explain their existence without God, they ultimately have to believe in life supposedly coming from non-life sometime in the distant past. Hence, upon examining scientific evolutionary literature, you will constantly see references to cosmic evolution, geological evolution, chemical evolution, and human evolution, etc.
The fact that biological evolution and chemical evolution and stellar evolution and so on all contain the word evolution does not mean that they're the same thing. It just means that they involve the same concept, which is a change over successive generations. For example, technology, which Calvin earlier used as a foolproof demonstration of why evolution is false, also evolves. So yes, the word evolution does apply to several different concepts across several different disciplines. But you know where it doesn't apply? Abiogenesis, an event which is preceded and proceeded by evolution, but is not itself evolution.
Not simply biological evolution, how one kind of creature supposedly changes into different kinds. Atheistic evolutionists must explain everything without God, including the universe, the earth, and life itself.
This is awful, but I want to be done so bad, so we're just going to keep going.
In the fossil record, you have lots of examples of animals eating each other, bones in their stomachs, but the Bible says originally Adam and Eve and the animals were vegetarian. We as humans weren't told to eat meat until after the flood, just as it gave you the plants. Now God changed our diet after the flood. Now you can eat everything. And if you believe in millions of years, there's lots of documented examples of diseases in the bones in the fossil record. Cancer, tumors, arthritis, abscesses. How could all that exist before man, when after God made man, he said everything was very good? These two things can't be true at the same time, which means all those fossils couldn't have been laid down over millions of years. How do you understand fossils? You have to start with Genesis 1 to 11. If there was a global flood, you'd expect to find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. And so the fossils are the graveyard of the flood, not the graveyard of millions of years.
All right, first of all, I don't appreciate how sensually that man was looking at me while he ate that meatloaf. Second of all, I am at this point 110% convinced that Ken Ham fundamentally lacks the ability to process hypotheticals. He literally just said, if you believe the Earth is billions of years old, then how do you explain all these abscesses and tumors and fossils when the Bible says that everything was good when God made humans? If you don't believe in the Bible, then how can you believe in this thing that contradicts the Bible? He literally just said you can't believe the Bible isn't true because the Bible is true. If Ken Ham had the cognitive ability to step just one toe outside of his own belief system and entertain a new idea for just 1 second, he might understand why what he just said makes so little sense and sounds so goofy to anybody who doesn't already 100% agree with him. But then, as has often been said, it is the mark of an intelligent mind to be able to entertain a thought without necessarily accepting it. For Ken Ham to be able to understand how other people think, he would first need to be able to think.
Flat earthers deny that there are any satellites or true astronauts that have gone into outer space. We haven't traveled to the moon, and there's no International Space Station, and all the photos and videos of Earth in space are fakes. I've had flat earthers declare that NASA projects images into the sky to trick people, and that it's a sham organization that's lied about everything it's supposedly ever done. Truly, suppose the flat earthers that hold to this level of conspiracy are in fact correct. It must be the most expensive, ambitious, multi-generational, and sophisticatedly coordinated operation that could ever be imagined. All apparently done before the invention of the internet. The resources and problems involved in planning, communicating, and carrying it out globally without such real-time communication or transcontinental travel would have been truly staggering. Which then begs the ultimate question. Why?
Mark your calendars. Remember where you were at this moment, because something monumental just happened. I just agreed with Calvin Smith. Literally everything that he just said was spot on, correct, and well articulated. For all of the scientists and universities and agencies and industries and governments all around the world to be this wrong about the shape of the Earth would be incalculably expensive, unbelievably coordinated, and impossibly complicated. A multi-generational conspiracy with no feasible mechanism and no apparent point. It would require, as flat earthers claim, that every level of every one of our educational institutions is corrupted, that there is some secret motivation for pulling people away from the truth, that the foundations of all modern science are built on a lie, and that all scientific knowledge which cannot directly be observed from start to finish is a complete toss-up. And what I need you to understand, more than anything else in this entire video, is that literally every single word of that also describes creationism. For all the scientists and universities and agencies and industries and governments around the world to be this wrong about the origins of the diversity of life would be incalculably expensive, unbelievably complicated, impossibly coordinated, a multi-generational conspiracy theory with no feasible mechanism and no apparent point. It would require, as creationists like Calvin Smith claim, that every level of every one of our educational institutions is corrupted, that there is some secret motivation for pulling people away from the truth, that the foundations of modern science are built upon a lie, and that every bit of scientific knowledge which cannot be directly observed from start to finish is a complete toss-up. He has said all of those things in videos that I have responded to on this channel. Calvin Smith just demolished Answers in Genesis and the entire creationist narrative that he has built his career upon by using the exact logic and reasoning skills that he is desperate for you to abandon. What a way to end the video. Overall, I give all of these shorts a Science Teacher Challenge level Y out of 10. Each one was goofier than the last. We started with them claiming that dragons are real, and we ended on them debunking a conspiracy theory that is exactly the same as their conspiracy theory. It's been a wild ride. By the way, there are still some spots left on my upcoming trip to Germany and Austria. We're skipping Thanksgiving to go sip spiced wine and buy cute little trinkets and tour cool castles, so be sure to use the link down below to sign up for that. And be sure to add your name to the mailing list while you're there, so you'll be the first to hear about my next educational adventures and get the chance to sign up before anybody else. There's a rumor that we're going to Zimbabwe and Costa Rica next year. And with that, I'm Forrest Valkai. Thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, and all the other stuff you do here on YouTube. Please exit through the gift shop on your way out, pick up one of these sweet t-shirts. Have an awesome rest of your day, and never stop learning. Bye-bye. I couldn't agree more, and that's a great way to summarize. I can see why you value thinking so much. As the thinking atheist, it seems like it's a major thing for you, and it's a major thing for me too, and I really appreciate your time.
Son of a... I swear to you, I'm going to drive. He lives 20 minutes from me. I'm driving over there, and I'm going to commit an act of, if not violence, I'm going to use very harsh language.
Yes.
I am not the thinking atheist. I am the thinking atheist. I am the thinking atheist. It is me. I am the thinking atheist. I am Seth Andrews, but I'm the thinking atheist. And on top of that, I am the thinking atheist.
And again, I'm going to edit this so it doesn't.
All right, dude. Just whatever. I don't care if you believe it in or not. I totally trust you. Go for it.